Hello, viewers. Tonight, I'm going to do another one of these Elden Ring podcasts. The subjects for tonight are, well, I suppose I have a variety of things that I would like to talk about, but I am once again going to be talking about the Elden Ring YouTube community. Especially a particular YouTuber who I had promoted, who I no longer promote, for the most part, merely due to his level of, and this is true for all of them, the man provides good information, and I decided there's this YouTuber known as Tarnished Archaeologist. And I would just say he promotes very good information. He really does. I will not take it away from him. I really can't, because he does his research. He does provide good information, whichever sources he finds that information from. But he said some things that I disagreed with and really felt for a YouTuber of, and his name is Tarnished Archaeologist. He produces mainly Elden Ring content, basically. He has talked about Dark Souls some before, but for the most part he does Elden Ring content. Now, I had done I believe, a few videos where I've mentioned him, and I've mentioned a few Elden Ring YouTubers. It is kind of funny that if you do any type of video and you disagree or criticize them and you mention them in it, it is quite funny that a lot of famous people will come to your video and they'll watch it and they'll just give you a dislike and just go away. So that is a very satisfying thing to do. And what I will do in this video, I will also use the mention system. And anyone I'm talking about, I will basically use a mention. So I'm expecting their viewer engagement and basically, giving me a dislike and some views. So that is wonderful. But anyhow, Tarnished Archaeologist in particular, although he gives good information, his videos, I started to realize he was basically trying to push some ideas of, that did not have to do with the game, that they did not have to do with the sort of in-game universe. And basically what he does is that he will do videos and he will throw shade at Christians, Christian beliefs, in particular. He will basically say, anyhow, he did a video where he basically had promoted a man named Bart Ehrman. Now this man is quite infamous for the fact that he goes around saying that Christians made Jesus God, and that basically Christians do not know how to read their own scriptures, and that somehow, basically, Christians who believe that are in some way deluded, and so, which just about every Christian believes that Jesus is God in some sense, whether they believe that Jesus is the Word of God, and he is the Son of God, the only begotten Son of God, and he is God in the sense that he is of the substance of the Father. He is his Son, his Word, the High Priest of the Church, what have you. People who believe in the Trinity, Christians in general believe Jesus is God. So you have this man, Bart Ehrman. He likes to talk a lot about the beliefs of Christians. And there are a lot of people like this. They like to talk about Christians and the perceived flaws that Christians apparently have. And this is what Tarnished Archaeologist basically sort of puts in his content. And he started doing it as far as when I noticed it, it was when he did the video about the Golden Order. Now, Tarnished Archaeologist promoted Bart Ehrman as though he was basically fact, and he didn't say that, hey, I have an opinion that Bart Ehrman is right, or this is my opinion. He gave no real forewarning to the viewers. Basically, he sort of leveraged the idea, the viewers trust me, the viewers respect me enough that they're going to really accept this. And it's sort of a type of, how should I say this, manipulative way to do content. A lot of viewers, especially people who play Elden Ring, they have a good deal of respect for people who do lore content. So a lot of people who play the game happen to be Christian. And so for some people, they're really amazed when a person takes the lore, finds different things out about it. To them, Miyazaki made the game in such a way that many people cannot understand it anyhow. So you have a lot of people. It is not enough for them to present their opinions or to present their insights in regard to the story. The way he presented Bart Ehrman in that video was quite disrespectful, because he didn't really give any credence to actual Christian beliefs, because Christians do not believe this type of idea that Jesus is just a man, he died like any other man, and people just made him a god. This is basically what Bart Ehrman presents. So basically he says, hey, we can take Radagon, and you can use Radagon to understand Christians and Christianity. Now, one can only imagine what was going on in that comment section. I cannot say. But I do know that Christians who play these games, this, and I know I am not unfamiliar with the narrative of Demon Souls, but it's not so much the narrative that I feel any type of way about. It is the way that Tarnished Archaeologist presented his information. It was really manipulative, because he has this way of basically taking some things that really, to be honest, it's questionable how much these things he talks about have to do with the story. And I know full well he could be talking about symbolism. He could be going to different books and talking about all types of aspects and explaining what things mean. But here he is trying to shoehorn this whole idea. Hey, look, yeah, Christians think that Jesus is God. Isn't that, this is so dumb. And he says a lot of bold things in that video. He's quite audacious in it. Okay? And now, a lot of these people take for granted that, and they know they're influencing a lot of people who probably, a lot of people don't even like to say they're Christian, especially these days. But there's always Christians who are playing video games. There's always Christians who are watching lore videos. So how does he, as a content maker who is appealing to many thousands of people who watch his videos, who really don't expect this sort of comes by surprise for them to see anything like this. It's sort of an ideological ambush to sort of come into contact with. And so, in a sense, that's also why I'm doing this video, because, and I know a lot of those YouTubers did not like the fact that I used the mention system. For one thing, they find the video because they go into their YouTube studio and they're able to find that I mentioned them. And, they do not like it, they show literally that they do not like it. Because for me, I can mention a person one time, for example, on a particular video. And what they will do is that a lot of them will basically dislike out of spite. No, they'll watch the video because they want to see if you are basically putting out any copyrighted content of theirs. But you see, out of spite, they'll basically give you a dislike. If you say anything, if you criticize them, they will do that. And so, which is fine, because this is engagement. If anything, they're helping me when they do that. So I expect that, and that's very good. But when I use the mention system, if someone searches their YouTube handle or even channel name, someone can find it. This is why I like to do this. This is why I like to use the mention system. Okay. These podcasts, sure. I mean, they may seem like basically just one person just doing some commentary, but it does have an effect. It affects the people who watch them a lot, especially the people who actually made the videos that I'm reviewing. And I've had all types of crazy things happen. Famous people have come to this channel for a little criticism videos that I will make. But anyhow, yes, Bart Ehrman, he will promote some particular things in his videos. So not too long ago, earlier tonight, I do believe, I decided I was going to watch some videos from FromSoft LoreTube, so to speak. I call it LoreTube, the sort of lore community. And I found some really good, interesting videos that were well done by a new guy. I forget the person's name. But there are a lot of new people they produce good content. They're not trying to shoehorn in a bunch of sort of, how should I say, they're not trying to basically teach a person their own little, teach people what to think about Jesus. And if a person talks about that subject of religion, of the religion of different people, I think a person has the responsibility to be very respectful. And, he surely shows that he is not. And it is not any surprise, because many of us who have played, and hey, I was a FromSoft fan before a lot of these people even started playing FromSoft games. And so people such as myself who had started with games like Evergrace, Armored Core, all of that stuff. You see, we weren't seeing all of the religious stuff that we're seeing in these games. So we have very religious games. Elden Ring is a very religious game, in that they are taking from a lot of religions. They are taking quite a lot from Christianity. So you see these disingenuous people who basically have nothing good to say about the religion of Christianity, but they're talking about the influence of Christianity in the games. And so, this is sort of what Tarnished Archaeologist does. So, I did a video about that, about, him basically promoting Bart Ehrman. And now I'm doing this video because basically what he's doing now is he's basically he has created, sort of drawn this type of connection between people tearing out their eyes and saying that this is a Christian thing to do. He neglects to mention one time that this is not something that most Christians do, that this is something that is a tradition of sort of self-mutilation, that is traditional in, how should it be said, Catholic penitence, and even Greek Orthodox penitence. This does not represent all Christians, and the choices of words that he uses basically allows him to generalize Christians, and he has done this. And he has done this quite a lot. Anytime he talks about Christians, he generalizes them negatively. He always does. There's no appreciation for the culture that Miyazaki and George R.R. Martin drew from. They simply do not care about that. And a lot of these people, whether we're talking about Castev, whether we're talking about Aegon of Astura, who is not religious, well, not necessarily, because in my, ideologically, atheism is an ideology, it's a worldview, it is a religion. So Aegon, basically, he himself has said that he does not believe in God. And I remember seeing a strange video with Aegon of Astura. Apparently, a woman who had watched him, or young woman, had died. And he did some weird video where basically it's almost as though he didn't have any sort of emotional intelligence. He mentions the woman's passing. The woman apparently had some type of disease or whatnot. And I remember seeing that video, and I'm sure almost none of you know what I'm talking about, this incident. But Aegon basically talked about it. He mentioned it. But he didn't look sad. He didn't look as though he was emotionally affected by it at all. It was just almost something you sort of mentioned in passing. And I'm thinking, here's a young woman who died. You knew her, at least on the internet. And I tell you, I'm not joking. And some of you, if you look through his channel, you can find the video, I'm sure. And he didn't seem, this man, I did not know how to explain that video, but in particular, it did not seem right to me. It seemed as though this man, what type of man is this? That is what was going through my mind. And he can come by, he can leave his little dislike, and engage with the channel too. I will also be mentioning him in this video, because if anyone searches for this video or his username, maybe they can find it, and maybe someone also thought that was weird, because I thought that was weird. It was some woman who had died, or some girl. I don't know what her age was, but she was pretty young. Okay. And apparently, from my understanding, he at least knew her online. Okay. He is, some of these people who do these lore videos, I do wonder about. And he is one of those individuals who I think about sometimes, and I think about that video. But anyhow, it is just as I have said. A lot of these people, they have a lot to say about Christianity, Christians, and what the game uses as an archetype, because basically, whether you're talking about Demon Souls, and basically all of this started from Demon Souls to Dark Souls, to Elden Ring, and even Bloodborne, they always use the Christian archetype. That is what is often done. But regardless if they use it or not, it is presented in a myriad of different ways. But you see, the sort of lesson that many people seem to glean from it is, well, this archetype is bad. These people are in control. They're sort of arranging some type of conspiracy to manipulate people. Okay? Whether you're talking about the clerics in Dark Souls or the priests in Demon Souls, the church is always bad to them. Now, I could say that Miyazaki went through that much trouble and really presented the church in a bad way, but to tell you the honest truth, I don't think he presented the church and the Christian archetype that he uses as bad as many of these so-called Loretubers like to present it as. So I could say something about Miyazaki's writing, okay? But to tell you the truth, I cannot say as much about his writing and his treatment of his Christian archetype. I cannot say that much about it, but I can say something about the people who interpret it, because it seems pretty weird to me, because to be honest, when, and there's this sort of notion in the whole type of community, the FromSoft lore community, of in Dark Souls, if you link the fire, basically the whole consensus is, and I've even read it in comment sections, Reddit and GameFAQs. People will say, you choose that Christian way. You're just a Christian. You think that, you want to link the fire, you want to save everyone off this talk. And I wonder, what does that even have to do with, what religion we are? And you see, if you sort of make a justification for why you choose the gold mask ending, it's the same way. People get in the same type of religious discussions. And the reason I cannot really say that much about this type of bigotry, which I've seen, in my opinion, is bigotry, because people are literally talking about people's religions, and they're sort of criticizing people based on the choices they make, or even how they perceive things to be. And I'm not talking about these YouTubers in particular, but I'm talking about the FromSoft lore community at large, so to speak. I mean, we can draw many things from this, but I just think that for the most part in the FromSoft lore community, you have this sort of weird anti-Christian sentiment. Not everyone has it, but some people do. Now, I have seen all types of weird things, such as the video of Cassidy basically talking about Ronnie and how her killing her brother was some type of good thing, and that she didn't say anything bad about. And I sort of wonder, how can any of this type of thinking be even remotely sensible? But anyhow, I mean, I will probably review all of those videos at some point. It is always a very interesting experience when I talk about the FromSoft lore community. And those particular YouTubers, are some of the more well-known ones. I mean, a lot of these people who have been, not necessarily well-known, but they've been around a long time. Alright? There's a lot of new people now. Not everyone is like this. At least in regard to what some of us people who are Christian think, because we see some bias that is very clear. And the truth is, it seems kind of strange, because a lot of these people, truth be told, and I've noticed, they're not explaining anything about numbers. There isn't much explanation regarding symbolism going on. Where are the astrologers? Where are the astrologers? Because I don't even see many astrologers. I mean, it's you hear a lot of talk about the Christian archetype, almost never in a respectful way, which is, truth be told, that is what I try to do in just about both of my blogs about Demon Souls, as well as my blog about the Frenzied Flame in Elden Ring. I talked about the Buddhist archetype being used in this sort of idea of the Frenzied Flame sort of consuming all ego and all, sort of individuality, in a sense. I mean, this is an idea that not only includes the physical reality, but also the mental reality. But I mean, in that particular blog and video, I tried to be very fair, and I did my research. You have a person who mentions a few things about Bart Ehrman and says that basically you can understand Christianity by what you basically experience in Elden Ring. And without any sort of hesitation, he said things like, Jesus has been made God. Men made him God. That is an audacious claim, and that is a very offensive thing to say when you have Christians who watch your content. And I'm sure that he knows that, but it's just as I say. These people, oftentimes, they know they will not get very much pushback because they know a lot of the Christians are going to be afraid. Now, my videos criticizing tarnished archaeologists are probably, in all likelihood, they're probably the only ones doing it. But, everything counts. So for me, it does not matter. It does not matter if even a few people watch it and sort of have learned something from it or really appreciate it. Everything has to start somewhere. So a lot of these people, I have seen in the From Self-Lore community, they really promote ideas to the audience to teach or propagate these sort of strange notions that most people don't have. It's just like most people did not know about Bart Ehrman. Most people did not even know about Christianity in general. So when you have people like tarnished archaeologists basically teaching people what to believe about Jesus and not presenting any sort of alternative idea, basically, Christians made Jesus God, and this is sort of how it is. There are a lot of people who play video games, they do not read, they do not get balanced perspectives. So this is my way of balancing the scales, sort of basically presenting another perspective. To be honest, so someone has to, I believe, give a counterpoint. Okay? We have people who basically are not Christian talking about what Christians believe, and Christians should basically say something. Now, people like tarnished archaeologists do not have to worry very much because they know in the comment sections and in terms of criticism, they have a fan base who will basically, if anyone decides to give them some very severe criticism, they're fans who basically, when you have fans of that magnitude, they will basically cover for you and support you when you have different groups who may be targeted by the content. So in other words, he can say this about Christians in this video. He knows he has for every Christian that basically leaves their conscientious opinion or basically just disagrees and really decides to make some points in the comment section, he is going to have about 5 or 6 or even 10 people who are basically going to comment and sort of drown any points out that could be made by any Christian opposition. So, and he knows how much people love this game. People do not realize how much power Elden Ring Loretubers have. When they say something, people listen, because people are desperate to understand what this game means. It is not that difficult to understand, truth be told, because even though you may not understand every aspect, you can understand what things mean. And to be entirely honest, there's a lot that these Loretubers have not presented very clearly. And I can see that. And this video is a good example, the one that he did about the Frenzied Flame. Now this is the one that I'm going to talk about in this podcast. It was Flame of Frenzy, the real Shibiri. So in this particular video, he decided to mention a few things about, as I said, he's talking about some penitents and some very extreme people who are tearing their eyes out. Now, he says that this is something just common among Christians. He does not mention what type of Christian does this. He does not mention that not every Christian denomination, or even, especially Protestant Christians who are not Catholic or Greek Orthodox or what have you. Not to mention the fact that this idea that he is promoting it is pretty biased in itself, because the way he says it makes it seem as though, oh, this is just a common thing. Christians are tearing their eyes out. And I know why he's doing it. He's doing it to sort of mar the image of Christians in the minds of his viewers. That is what he is doing. And he knows that he is doing that. Quite simply. But anyhow, I am going to listen to the video and show one part of the video that is relevant. At least some pictures from it. Now, this is the video in question. And basically I will show you the pictures here. So basically he's saying reasons for self-enucleation. So basically he in this later part of the video, he shows some reasons for people basically gouging out their eyes. And he makes a big point of mentioning Christians. He says, oh, Christians do this because of Christian guilt. The Christian church makes them feel so guilty they gouge out their eyes. Now, if I was a Catholic, I would be even more offended. If I was a Greek Orthodox person, I would be even more offended. Because basically he is talking about, he's not only talking about them, of course, he's talking about all Christians in general. But for the most part, there were some extreme ascetics and other people who would do this. Now, he isn't going to go into very much detail about why these people do this, or why, or anything having to do with the so-called Christian guilt, as he calls it. But he's promoting ideas of a sort of anti-Christian sort. This is what he does. This is what he likes to do. And people such as myself, we see it. A lot of Christians are not going to make videos and basically talk about it because they're not interested in doing that type of thing. But anyhow, here we go. Basically, here's your Catholic church. He has the images arranged, and he's basically for this later part of the video, that's what he talks about. He talks about Christians, and he says, yeah, he plunged his eyes out because he's a Christian. It is just as I've said, penitent people, these people who do these extreme things, these are not common Christians. These are not people, for the most part, who do this, simply because they're Christian, or simply, this isn't your run-of-the-mill Catholic or Greek Orthodox person. It is not. Now, he can say whatever he wants to say with this little theory that he came up with, but the way he said it makes it seem as though, oh, this is just what Christians do. Even though he's talking about very particular people who believe in the sort of extreme ideas of sort of self-mortification. Okay? But instead of saying Catholic, Greek Orthodox, or penitents, or ascetics, or whatnot, and of course that is but I mean, there were some extreme people who did this stuff. He doesn't really say that. He says Christians do this. So he misrepresents the whole issue. He misrepresents the whole topic. And he basically uses it to create a narrative. Hey, yeah, these Christians are pretty crazy, don't you think? Okay, that's what he's doing. Everyone please remember, this is about a video game. This is not some type of serious or ideological argument. This is a lore video. And he's basically promoting anti-Christian sentiment in his videos. Okay? And this is the second one I've watched where he's promoted anti-Christian sentiment. Because, you see, in the other one I referred to, the one about the Golden Order, that was this video. That was Creeds of the Earth Tree. In this one, he said that basically Christians made Jesus God. People made Jesus God. And that basically our faith in Jesus as God, as our God, the Son of the Father, it's delusional, basically. Okay? He mocks the idea, and he promotes Bart Ehrman as though Bart Ehrman is fact. which is incredible because there are a lot of people, and for me to go through the debates that have been had with Bart Ehrman and the people who disagree with him, it really wouldn't do much good at this point, because it's just as I've said, many people have done that. Many people do videos about Bart Ehrman responding to him. But Bart Ehrman has a very particular belief about Jesus and Christianity that is offensive to most of us Christians. But he still put that video out. Has he basically said that Buddha was not real or any of these other religious figures were not real? No. You know, he's taking the Christian archetype of Christianity that is presented in Elden Ring. He is basically saying, hey, this is the way it is. Jesus is not God, and this whole idea, it's just like Radagon is not God and what have you. Okay? It was I saw clearly what he was doing. And a lot of anyone who wants to sort of see this, you can watch the video yourself. Now, I'm going to listen to this sort of Frenzied Flame video, but this is the second video where he has sort of showed his very clear anti-Christian sentiment. Now, if he was dealing with any other group, I cannot imagine that he would show the same level of audacity or disrespect. He feels justified. He feels this is what this game promotes, and this is his outlet to sort of show his disdain for Christianity and Christians, and to sort of basically besmirch any sort of reputation that Christians have or that our religions and beliefs sort of have. He really wants to do it, and he in this video he mentions some very strange things about and I know what Shibiri is because I even read books about Shibiri, okay, and what he is going to mention in this video, and he decides to put some filler content in this video to basically extend it. Basically he talks about river worms, and we're going to listen to it very shortly, but basically I'm showing some pictures here because I'm not going to play this. I'm going to listen to audio, okay, but basically he decides to talk about the river worms and which are causing blindness. So he shows a few unrelated things, and you see this is all, you put unrelated things in a video like this, a lore video, to stretch the content out. Okay, obviously, whatever is in Elden Ring, he didn't show any proof that the Frenzied Flame was some type of river worm, because it has nothing to do with a river worm. Shibiri sort of sets above clear water at night, and you have to say a certain word. You have to say his name backwards or something in order to get him to go away. Apparently he's attracted to clear and shining vessels. I know quite a lot about it, but this whole connection he tries to make between Shibiri and river worms, hey, it didn't make any sense. But you see, this is what a lot of these lore YouTubers like to do. They're not going to give you a video basically full of symbolism. I mean, his earlier videos were pretty good, I will say that. However, a person can kind of tell. The work is sort of, this is sort of diversion. This doesn't have anything to do with Shibiri or the Frenzied Flame. Okay, you can claim that the eye somehow rotted out, but this is mostly having to do with fire. Okay, and if anything, it has to do with the crucible and basically being melted. But we haven't seen any sort of evidence for there being any type of worm that somehow is getting into people's eyes and causing some type of infection, so to speak. But anyhow, this was something that he really decided to talk about quite a lot in this video, which I thought, this is one of the things that a lot of these lore YouTubers like to do. they can't really just sit there and explain everything, so they have to come up with all types of unrelated ideas, which is another reason why, at some point I just felt, I really do not go to the lore tube very much. These Elden Ring lore videos or Demon Souls videos or Dark Souls videos, well, for one thing, Demon Souls didn't really have much of a community, to be honest. But Dark Souls, it was kind of like that. You would hear all types of crazy ideas and theories that I think about them now and I cannot make anything of them. But anyhow, despite that, he is, speculation is interesting, speculation is fun. I'm going to listen to this. I'm not going to really play this. I'm not going to play his intro because this is his little, no. I'm not really concerned with that. I'm interested in basically what all of this, what he has to say. That's what I'm interested in.
Probably this is not something you frequently ask yourself, but that's only because...
One moment. Oh, okay. I have to check these audio settings. Okay. Yes. They seem good. So...
Because of intersubjectivity. That is to say, if many people see the same thing, then we agree it's probably real. But what if you start seeing things that other people don't see? Which one is real? The world that you see, or the one that everyone else does? Perhaps both, perhaps neither. And most importantly, what would you do if you thought the world you experienced wasn't real? These are questions that philosophers and college freshmen alike have been asking for a very long time. And in Elden Ring, the question is posed through a horrifying and real-world inspired story. The story of Vike, Ayeda, the Shabriri grapes, and the flame of frenzy. River blindness is the second leading cause of infectious...
Now, he did promote the idea, which I do believe there's credence to this idea, that the Erd tree burned down. If you do not know what he is talking about, he believes that the Erd tree burned down, and that the Erd tree is an illusion, which he understands because he understands it that way because when you get the golden seed description, it says that the small Erd trees are illusions. So basically, that is the basis that he is using, and so I have a lot more to add to that, but I'm not going to say much about it yet, because personally I disagree with him. I believe the Erd tree has been abstracted from its physical. Basically, the physical part of it is gone, but the spiritual part of it is still there. So I do not believe that is necessarily an illusion. I believe that basically at this point, there's the spiritual outline of the Erd tree is left. Some particular part of the Erd tree is still around at the base, but basically most of it has been burnt down. That is the idea. And the idea is that the giants basically had the fire, and at one point the giants succeeded and burned a good deal of that tree. Now somehow Radagon, in some way, and this was talked about on Reddit, and other people had talked about it even before Tarnished Archaeologist was talking about it, in terms of this idea that Radagon is connected to causality, and somehow that Radagon was able to basically mend the Erd Tree. And I think Radagon has a lot to do with spiritual things too. The Giant's Flame has to do with burning down everything that is physical and leaving a spiritual outline of it. That is why, to be honest, I think when you go to the mountaintops of giants and you see spiritual outlines around each of those trees, but all of the trees are dead, and basically you have pine trees, but those trees are spiritual. It is this idea that the spiritual existence is eternal, the physical existence is temporal. The idea that the spiritual precedes the physical, the spiritual comes before the physical, and the spiritual surpasses the physical. So in a sense, it is as though the Erd Tree has been abstracted from the physical. The spiritual has been abstracted from the physical. The physical is basically, for the most part, destroyed. So that is very interesting. But I'm going to talk about that in another podcast. But he's going to talk some about river worms and this weird connection that he has come up with. Which, you know, Shibiri, the sort of idea of it, it's supernatural. This is considered a demon. And a lot of these people, you can clearly tell they're not religious people. They cannot grasp spiritual ideas and sort of supernatural ideas without somehow connecting it to the physical. Okay, they always have to do that. They cannot understand the supernatural idea that does not have some type of natural explanation to it. It has to have some type of common sense explanation to it. It can't be completely weird. But anyhow, I'm going to
blindness
listen
worldwide,
to more of this.
Affecting over 20 million people in 2017. It's caused, as opposed to causes of blindness perhaps more ordinary to the developed world, like diabetes or macular degeneration, by a parasitic worm, the filarial nematode Onchocerca volvulus. We are the obligate host for this worm, meaning it cannot survive without infecting us. Humans are infected by the bite of an adult black fly, which deposits larvae under the skin of us, the host. It's called river blindness because the risk of infection is related to being near a water source where the flies are spawning. These deposited larvae mature, then live under the skin for usually about a year, before migrating under the skin and, of course, reproducing. The total number of these tiny parasitic worms.
And I have to say, honestly, he brought up a lot of unrelated things in this video. Or at least two. Basically, this whole idea about river blindness and this whole Christian idea. Oh, Christians have a history of, you know, it's a common thing for Christians to tear out their eyes, you know. And he just puts that in there. And this video starts off, he's talking about river blindness. All right, you're talking about that in connection to the Frenzied Flame. You're saying it's caused by flies or, you know, okay, where are the flies? Where are the insects? Where is the water that people are getting the Frenzied Flame from? Because the only liquid type substance we would think are the liquids of the Crucible. And this is a whole sort of more philosophical matter than what he is talking about. I mean, because this is sort of a natural, you know, result of sort of being around water, you know. I mean, this can be explained naturally, what he is talking about. But this is not something that is in the game. I mean, this is obviously not river blindness, so what is it? Why is he even talking about river blindness? And I think about that, and this is such a waste of time to even talk about something like this. And I see this a lot. But to tell you the truth, I see it more in his videos than any other lore videos. And I might as well give a critique upon it because it's just, I mean, some of the things he says, my goodness. I mean, I just think, okay, has he explained the connection between river blindness and Shibiri and Elden Ring and the Frenzied Flame? No. And he isn't going to through the entire video. Basically, he's going to mention river blindness, somehow connect river blindness to Shibiri. Okay, one is physical, the other is supernatural, completely supernatural, by the way. I guess somehow, and he isn't saying that he's trying to connect the Jewish lore of Shibiri to river blindness. But still, he kind of does that. Which, alright, he's saying that basically there's a natural explanation for this, for the lore of this Jewish demon. Okay, fine. I mean, that makes some sense, but I don't really think he expressed it that way. But even so, the question would be, in relation to the Frenzied Flame, okay, where's the river? Okay, where's the river that these people are getting blind from? Why even mention the story? Other than to basically discount the whole supernatural aspect of Shibiri in a game that has nearly everything to do with supernatural, the supernatural and religious side of the narrative. But, I mean, basically this is a way of saying, oh, those Jewish people, yeah, they were wrong. It was just some type of parasite. Okay. You know, and I see this a lot. A lot of more atheistic individuals, or people who think that religious people are somehow, you know, stupid. They like to take anything supernatural and basically try to find some type of, you know, I mean, and they explain it as though it's fact. Oh, religious people have the supernatural explanation for it, but, you know, there has to be some way to bust the myth. Okay? I mean, but that's basically what he's doing. He could just go into Shibiri. He could go into the symbolism of Shibiri, but instead, he's going to talk about river blindness. But this wasn't even the worst part of this video for me as an experience.
In an infected host can reach 100 million. Once they start migrating, they seem to have a particular predilection for the eye, which is why they can cause blindness. Onchocerciasis, the medical name for this infection, causes blindness by directly infecting the eye, damaging the optic nerves and surrounding structures, often causing characteristic external features, making it quite easy to identify those affected by just looking at their eyes. The symptoms, especially if untreated, include an unbearably itchy skin rash, pain, progressive blindness, and even seizures, if the parasite makes it to the brain. These symptoms, while horrifying and alien to most of us, are just the facts of life in endemic areas, predominantly sub-Saharan Africa, with an estimated 200 million people still at risk of infection currently in the world today. And there are many other types of parasitic blindness beyond just river blindness. So common is the association between water and blindness that, in fact, many folktales and myths have sprung up to explain this connection. The Burkinabe people in West Africa, for example, tell a story of how, if you live too close to the river itself will eat your eyes. And in the Hebrew Bible, there is a demon that lurks in uncovered water at night and causes blindness in those who drink the water. The name.
Now this is very interesting. He says in the Hebrew Bible, you know, there's Shibiri, or his name, the name Shibiri comes from the Jewish lore of Shibiri, but he says the Hebrew Bible, which basically is the Torah. Now there's two different types of Torah. There's the Torah and the oral Torah. Okay? Basically the Tanakh includes all of the books. the Torah, and, all of the other different books, whatever they're called, basically. Okay, the Tanakh is basically what we may very well call their, basically the Old Testament, so to speak. However, there's also the Oral Torah. The Oral Torah are basically stories from the rabbis that have been given, that have basically been circulated orally. Basically, this was carried by word of mouth. So, he says that's in the Hebrew Bible. As though that's, okay, can you specify which book this came from? No. Can you tell us that this is the Oral Torah? Can you tell us that this is the Talmud? Or, he isn't going to say that. He's going to say, oh, this came from the Hebrew Bible. To misrepresent the Hebrew Bible, as though the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, has the Old Testament, has Shibiri in it. No. And so his whole idea is that basically Shibiri is a parasite, even though we know Shibiri is connected to the three fingers. If Shibiri is connected to the three fingers, that seems to indicate something far more supernatural than what he is presenting. Now, this is his way of basically sort of connecting, the idea of Shibiri, he does hang around water, but at the same time, the only watery substance that we have in the Frenzied Flame story is the crucible. So of the crucible waters, the tears, so to speak. But, he could talk about some more of that symbolical and philosophical significance, but he won't do it. But anyhow, I just thought it was very interesting. Let's see, there's much.
This demon is Shibiri.
Okay.
So, now you know where we're going with this. Elden Ring Shibiri, as has been pointed out by many internet sleuths early on in Elden Ring's life cycle, is indeed named after this demon of Hebrew mythology. But the story of that demon is in turn inspired by real-world parasitic infections that are associated with water and cause blindness. The game even makes it clear that Frenzy is a...
And this is the sort of atheistic assumption. This is the sort of materialistic assumption. This is the sort of materialistic thinking. The idea that every supernatural phenomenon has to be explained by a physical this sort of physical idea. Oh, that demon that these Jewish people were talking about. Obviously, it wasn't real. It's just some parasite, and that any sort of idea that they have of a demon, whether, this has something to do with it or not, at the same time, I do see that often in media, and it's a very interesting thing to determine how people think. He could have just brought the idea of Shibiri and presented it. He could have just used different books and cited different sources and said, okay, this idea of Shibiri is that you have a Jewish demon who causes blindness. You have other elements about that story that are connected to this narrative in Elden Ring. I did the same thing in my video. Basically, I took things directly about Shibiri, citations about, quotations about Shibiri, and what Shibiri was considered, and different facts about him. But in this case, it's as though, okay, in this video, he has to explain the supernatural component of that story away. And it is very interesting because you see a lot of us people who are religious, a lot of us people who have more experience with this type of thing, we can actually explain these things having to do with the supernatural, and we really do not have to feel ashamed at all. And we can do it without any sort of hesitation. We can go to different sources, different books. We can sort of cite them in a very serious manner. But you see, a person such as him, he cannot do that. If it has, it is just as I've said regarding his depiction of the Christian archetype. He could have did that respectfully, but he couldn't do it respectfully. He had to explain the idea of Jesus away. He had to say, well, here's this man, Bart Ehrman. He's going to explain the idea of Jesus away. Yeah, you know, we're talking about something supernatural. It influenced the game. It influenced the people who made the game, whether those people believe in Jesus or not. He had to explain the religious component, the supernatural component of it away, but not necessarily the religious component, because that's a vague, abstract word that could mean something as simple as ideological component. All right? But basically, he has to explain the supernatural component of it away. He cannot just simply present it as it was believed to be. And this is one of the reasons why, you know, not all Loretubers do this. Not all of them do this. Some of them do. In my opinion, it sort of wastes time in the video, but nonetheless, you know, that was very interesting. So he's doing the same thing in this video. In other words, the supernatural component has to be explained away. He's not even presenting accurate information, because he is not going to say, oh, this is part of the Hebrew Bible. Yeah, because the Hebrew Bible does not have that. It is the particular oral Torah. This is some oral folklore of Jews. This is not in the Tanakh or what is commonly known as the Old Testament. So he's presenting these facts, but he's not even presenting them accurately. He has to put his own spin on it. And he does this a lot. He did this in the video about the Golden Order. He did this in the video where he was saying that Jesus was a man and that he was not God. Very interesting. Okay. So I'm going to basically play this whole video.
A transmissible disease, according to the inescapable frenzy description, which reads, quote, causes the yellow flame of frenzy to blaze from the caster's eyes. The caster then latches onto foes, spreading the madness, end quote. Importantly, the name Shabriri, as a reference to the folklore surrounding parasitic blindness, like river blindness, goes even further. And exploring these real-world inspirations can help us decipher the in-game story. Blindness, not specifically river blindness, but really any acquired blindness, can cause paradoxical visions called visual release phenomena, basically visual hallucinations, caused.
But I'm starting to understand how he does things, because you see, he stated this phenomenon of Shibiri without any sort of claim. This is my opinion that Shibiri is a parasitic blindness and not a supernatural blindness. Okay, he could have said, this is my opinion that this Jewish folklore, this Jewish idea of there being some type of demon is just purely parasitic. No, he says, well, you know, this is parasitic blindness. And that is what he did in that video about Jesus and Radagon. What he did was he stated, oh, yeah, Jesus, yeah, they made him into God. You know, and he basically promoted Bart Ehrman, and he basically presented that idea that he had, that bias that he had, as fact. And it was so obvious. And so this is something he does. And that is a weakness of his content, because, to be entirely honest, these are opinions that he has. Okay? So basically, he seems to have this sort of way of dealing with things of a supernatural nature. He deals with them in this way. That's how he deals with them. Alright, so that is something interesting to highlight. Actually, I do not need to open the full window here.
By your brain trying to fill in the gaps and create visual information after being deprived of it due to blindness. In other words, your brain is still trying to see, it just no longer has any actual visual information coming from the eyes, so it creates its own. People affected by this will describe anything from a simple hallucination like lines or shapes to far more complex ones like seeing faces or sometimes even entire scenes. So in a way, river blindness doesn't just cause blindness, but it actually changes what you see. And in Elden Ring, what is in your eyes definitely controls what you see. There's a nice parallel here with the Golden Runes, for example, the Lands Between rune, which reads, quote, "Grace said to have once dwelled in the eyes of the inhabitants of the Lands Between, the lingering residue of gold. No grace resides in the eyes of the tarnished. If it ever did, it is now lost." End quote. Credit to Reddit user Drew Ewing for pointing this out. The phrase "dwelled in the eyes" here is meant to be quite literal, of course, as we know that many characters recognize us as tarnished just by looking in our eyes.
Now, I mean, that makes me think of some interesting points. We know, some of us Christians know that Jesus said the light of the body is in the eye. And we also, and there's some other relevant things about the eye. Traditionally, the eye was considered to be a type of light in itself and could transmit beams. And so, I mean, these are some of the more supernatural and spiritual things. And they all have to do with symbolism. And that could be talked about in detail, to be honest. And I have already talked a little about them in some of my videos, but I'm going to do that more often. But it's just that I really have not had the time to do anything more structured than a few podcasts. So I'm going to listen to the rest of this.
And even the eyes of our paterfamilias Godfrey faded characteristically one fateful day. The color of your eyes is basically diagnostic for the influence one is under during the game. And visually, the rune items, especially the more valuable ones, look more and more like actual eyes. FromSoft have kind of done this before with Cold Blood Dew in Bloodborne, consumable items that become increasingly arcane as they become more and more valuable, and it becomes increasingly evident what their true nature is. Likewise here, the more valuable rune items make it clear that what we are actually collecting comes from eyes. So the general notion seems to be that the influence of the three fingers manifests with river blindness eye, aka Shabriri grape, a kind of parasitic infection, while two fingers influence manifests as golden eyes, referred to as the grace of gold. Of course, there's more than a little bit of orthodox propaganda in these item descriptions and terms. And in both cases, this influence clearly affects
orthodox propaganda, he says. Of course. Because, you know, as he has stated before, a lot of it does have to do with Orthodox Church symbolism, Catholic symbolism, of course. And truth be told, even from the old days of Berserk, there really was promoted this whole sort of idea, the church is evil, the church is an institution of great malignant power. And I will be honest, the Vatican institution has been very pernicious. Most of us who are not Catholic already know this. However, that having been said, I mean, there are many institutions which are pernicious. Do we have games back to back that happen to basically sort of promote oh, the church is just so evil, or the Nazis are so evil. I mean, how many games do we find talking about anything other, especially a lot of these Japanese RPGs, where the church is just some sort of, just the principal villain? And I think a lot of it has to do with a sort of Freemasonic resentment, because it was known, if you attended a lodge, you were sort of against the Catholics, and the Catholics were sort of against a lot of the more Masonic people. And there was a big rivalry for a long time, and I mean, there is some, Masonic influence in media. And whether people want to take that seriously or not, that's fine. I mean, but it is a well-known fact, and if no one believes it, all they have to do is study books about Freemasonic study of symbolism. I mean, to make games like this takes a good deal of skill. Freemasons have a long history of rivalry against the Catholics. The Catholics are good at symbolism, and so are Freemasons. The difference is that Freemasonic influence has been noted in media for a long time, especially in this country, but also in Japan, because there are Freemasonic lodges in Japan, and there are a lot of people who attend them. Some of these people happen to make video games and television shows and the like, and we wonder how a person such as George R.R. Martin has any type of connection to Miyazaki. And, whether people want to do some of that conspiratorial thinking, hey, they can do it if they want. I myself think and know that amongst brothers, amongst lodge brothers, regardless of which lodge you attend, if you are a Mason, you can become very, you can basically have a sort of, you basically have an allegiance to the organization, so to speak, to the institution, so to speak. And so, I mean, you sort of have a brotherly bond, a sort of obligation to help one another, especially in the attainment of different goals, that are sort of, how should I put this? They affect society in different ways. I would just put it that way. But there are different rules that they have. You cannot betray a fellow brother in the craft. Okay, so I mean, it was a pretty amazing collaboration. But nonetheless, they have a vast knowledge of symbolism. But instead of talking about some of the more symbolic aspects of the game and what it means symbolically, what it means spiritually, a lot of these people, they will, everything has to have a physical cause. Everything has to be explained away. And you see that this is not, everything in the game is basically having to do with spiritual things. So, but I even forgot what point I was trying to make, honestly. I went on into a tangent. Maybe I will remember what I was about to say.
What we see. For example, as we discussed in our previous video, many NPCs are impressed that we can still see the guidance of grace at all, establishing that the world we see is somehow affected by whether or not we've been graced. Likewise, the description of the Golden Rune reads in part, quote, "Even now, runes are still imbued with the power of life itself. Do you see the Erd Tree towering over there?" End quote. The implication of this question being that some people don't even see the Erd Tree at all. Similarly, the finger reader crone outside the walls of Langdell asks us, with a certain tone of desperation,
"Surely you see it too. The gold that enshrouds the heavens. The great tree which begets the pillars of light.
We've gone into depth as to the other reasons why this might be the case in previous videos, so here let's just keep it simple. The only reason to ask if we see the gigantic golden tree towering in the distance, which of course would be an absurd question otherwise, is that not everyone can see it, just like not everyone can see the guidance of grace. Indeed, these days, the Erd tree is merely an object of faith. Likewise, the Shabriri grape, which causes a burning in the back of Hyeda's eye, that also guides her, a distant light as she calls it, is inspired by visual hallucinations seen by the blind, including those afflicted with river blindness. Hyeda is guided by a light that only she can see. For context, this is an idea FromSoft have beautifully explored before with Bloodborne's Ludwig, who is guided by fleeting bits of light, a private, elusive sort.
And I have to say, they have always had a good deal of symbolism of eyes, which, I've watched plenty of these lore videos. I haven't really received very much explanation in regard to why they use eyes. Many of these people do not talk about more of the deeper symbolism. Now I've heard, or rather I've read from different books, it has to do with the monad, it has to do with the sun and moon, it has to do with a sort of almost a symbol in a sense for God and even the soul. But I know there's two parts to this video, and I would be very interested if he actually talked about the fact that the individuality of the people who are afflicted with the Frenzied Flame is basically lost, and they're basically becoming one thing, and they're losing all sense of self. Now, that has some Buddhist implications, but I remember he compared Ronnie's ending to being more of a Buddhist archetype, which I do not understand, but this is the real Buddhist archetype in my opinion, or Hindu archetype, this whole idea of sort of, it's found in many different ideologies. It can be found in Gnosticism, but this is more or less, to me, it's more or less a more dualistic sort of Buddhist understanding of having yourself sort of consumed and, not really being sort of having an ego, really. But anyhow, let me play the rest of this. I guess I'll just listen to the rest of it.
But that's a story for another day.
I wasn't really expected to listen to the whole video, but...
So, being affected by the flame of frenzy appears to actually change what you see. This helps to explain why in the cutscene of the Frenzied Flame ending, there is a literal optic disc in the sky. Not only does it look like a real-life optic disc as you'd see on a fundoscopic exam, but if you compare the image of the sky to the artwork of the frenzied eye, it's identical. So there's a literal eye in the sky, a clear allusion to the fact that frenzy changes the world by changing how its adherents see it. So we ask again, what would you do if you started to doubt that the world you experienced visually wasn't the real one? Elden Ring offers one answer to this question through the tragic story of Fingerprint Vike, once known as Round Table Knight Vike. Vike was a knight of the Round Table Hold, an adherent of the ancient dragon cult, and the most accomplished Tarnished prior to the player character's arrival, perhaps besides Lord Godfrey himself. Not only was he Lanciax's favorite, but he is the only one prior to us to have collected 2 great runes. So why didn't he mend the Elden Ring then? Well, we are told he fell to the flame of frenzy, apparently seduced with the possibility of saving his maiden from her gruesome death as kindling for the flame of ruin. Though this intention is undoubtedly noble, it set him down a dark path, and he was, according to the fingerprint grape description, ultimately embraced by the 3 fingers, his skin seared with their indelible mark. These seared marks, by the way, may also be inspired by river blindness, which causes unbearably itchy skin lesions. Over time, these lesions harden like scale, and sometimes the itch is so intense that sufferers have been known to burn their own skin just to get relief. We get this item, by the way, from Vike himself after he invades us as festering fingerprint Vike. So Vike inherited the Flame of Frenzy, but we know he didn't trigger the Frenzied Flame ending because, well, the world still exists. So what happened? Well, in the Lord Contender's Everjail, we see him imprisoned, and critically, he's somehow been cured of frenzy. His moniker has changed back to Round Table Knight Vike, and he's using his red lightning incantations instead of...
Now, how anyone is able to justify this in terms of narrative just goes to show how desperate the FromSoft faithful are to basically consider this game perfect without any flaws. Many of us have played Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, and Demon Souls. And for the most part, it has been, if someone invades you, just like when Ostrava invades us in Demon Souls. If he invades us, that's him invading us. Okay? I mean, a lot of these NPCs that invade us, they're really invading us. So, the idea that, Vike was in 2 places at one time, or that somehow he gouged his eye out and somehow his eye is now invading you. I suppose, we're supposed to just think of that and think that FromSoft wasn't being lazy, when we know that they have been lazy when they did the Godfrey thing, the sort of God, they used 2 of the same boss, okay, and that was lazy. This whole thing with Vike, I mean, it's lazy, and it cannot be explained narrative-wise. They reused Vike, and they basically gave us another fight with him. Okay? It is not at all explained as to why and how he can rip his eye out, and somehow that eye is somehow, that eye is supposedly supposed to be Vike invading us again. Okay, if it's the eye and the Frenzied Flame wants it, and the eye is controlled by the Frenzied Flame, technically, because everything the Frenzied Flame infects, it has some type of control over. Basically, we would ask the question, okay, why is why is Vike fighting us? Because after all, it's just his eyeball invading us. I mean, he doesn't really say that, but that's the implication. And it's stupid to even try to justify something like this, because it does not make any sense. But this is what happens when you're willing to basically defend the game no matter what, and try to explain everything, which is what a lot of these FromSoft Loretubers do. And I've seen it. It does not make any sense to me, but okay, we can speculate, and that is what a lot of it is. Speculation. These and which is one of the problems I have with these videos. They're so scripted. Okay, And I have to say, in that sense, I kind of like Aegon's and Cassidy's content more, because their content is basically podcast content, and most of their content is not so scripted, and you can hear their opinions about things more clearly. But I mean, in this case, not to say they're much better, because they defend everything in the game too, and even things that basically you look at and you say, there's no way you can explain this. Vike is not in two places at the same time. That makes no sense. Okay, I mean, who put him in the jail? Who put him in the Everjail? Okay, I mean, we have an explanation as to why, what's his name, Blad, or the Wolfman, or whatever his name is in the Everjail. We don't have any explanation as to why Vike is just standing there. Okay, we have none at all, as far as I know. But I'm going to keep listening. Maybe there was something I missed. Maybe there's something that, I need to hear over again. I don't know.
The Frenzied Flame incantations. At first glance, it's easy to write this off as simply another case of temporal shenanigans. The flow of time is convoluted and whatnot. But actually, closer inspection of the forensics tells a different story. Because the fingerprint grape tells us that this is actually Vike's eye, and we can even see a fingerprint on the eye itself, indicating that Vike, with his flesh already seared, gouged his own eye out. And if the flame of frenzy manifests in one's eyes, perhaps enucleation, the process of removing an eyeball, would provide a cure. We do know one way to disinherit the Frenzied Flame, Miquella's Needle, but that seems to be a totally separate process. After all, there are countless people affected by the Flame of Frenzy in the game, represented visually by the yellow frenzied eyes, but only one who has actually inherited the flame itself, represented by the seared flesh. So it's best to treat these two as separate processes. Perhaps Vike, after inheriting the Frenzied Flame, but eventually overcome with guilt about this path and unable to see it to completion, decided to tear out the source of frenzy, removing his own eye, and imprison himself in an Everjail as penance, and to ensure that he would never be in a position to bring about the frenzied chaos. Perhaps that is why the frenzied spirit outside the Frenzied Flame village speaks with such apparent disappointment when he says, quote, "Ah, Lord Vike, it seems you were no lord after."
Now, I have to say something about this claim, that apparently Vike put himself in the Everjail. What I have to say is this. If that were to make sense, and FromSoft, if they did their due diligence, if this is the case, okay, if we go to that particular Everjail and basically fight Vike before we go to that, that particular chapel in that particular village over there in Liurnia, to basically get the fingerprint grape or whatever it is called, basically, we would have to not be able to do one or the other. In other words, if we find Vike in the Everjail when we have not even fought him, what sense does it even make for him to invade us? Now, I have not tried it that way, but I may do that. I may do that just to see if FromSoft did their due diligence, because obviously I should not be able to go to that Everjail and fight Vike if I have not basically fought him in that other particular area, because after all, if you kill him in the Everjail, he should be dead, right? And I do not know if he explains that during this video. I'm pretty sure he did not. It is just, as I say, a lot of people, they want to make some type of narrative with this game. They'll clutch on to anything that they can to make a lot of the narrative make sense. Their time would be better spent explaining what things mean, but they want to make some type of consistent narrative. And the truth is, the Elden Ring narrative is not it is not, I mean, there is a lot of symbolism, there's a lot of meaning to the game. However, a lot of things have not been well explained. It was a big problem they had when the game first released, and people could not even find all of the NPCs and a lot of the other things and problems this game had that none of these people talked about, of course, because they never do. They only have good things to say about it. I mean, in the case of Ashen Hollow, in which they just sort of lose patience with it, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, personally, I don't think that can even really be well explained. To be honest, this whole idea of Vike basically being in, because it still is him being in two places at once. And they can try to justify it. But to me, you can't.
Then where is he, our true lord, our lord of Frenzied Flame? End quote. This fits quite nicely with the notion that Vike reneged on his plan to become the Lord of Frenzied Flame, opting instead to tear out his own eye and repent. This religious connotation fits quite well with another real-world inspiration, the fact that autoenucleation, the process of removing one's eyes, in reality a manifestation, of course, of psychosis, has long been associated in the psychological literature with ideas of Christian guilt, going all the way.
And it is so funny because a person may not realize what he did there. He basically connects psychosis and Christianity with some dubious psychological literature, of course, and uses it as a justification to take one more little sharp give his own little sharp take on, Christians again. He already has spoken about us before. But anyhow, now, did anyone notice that this was so important for him to make this point about Christians somehow, in general, just tearing their eyes out? This point was so important to him that he decided he had to go through the trouble of basically presenting his theory of basically this sort of gouging, autoenucleation or whatever it is called. He has to go through the trouble of actually literally making this theory true. In other words, he has to really accept it as basically being the case. In other words, it has to be something. He's talking about that theory as though it is basically, okay, this is the theory that I accept and I'm presenting to you. Now I'm going to talk about why Christians do it and how Christians are really, this is a big thing for Christians. Christians do this a lot. For one thing, he has not proven this theory. He has not proven this theory, and it is a very shaky theory at best. But you see, this shaky theory is something he's going to use to build on to end his video off with this whole little, basically this sort of critique of Christian culture. Oh, Christians gouge their eyes out because they're feeling guilty. He does this intentionally, I believe, because he knows he has certain agendas, certain notions that he wants to promote. And instead of just doing a separate video where he talks about what he really feels about, how he really feels about Christians, he decides, I'm going to use Elden Ring lore to express my ideas, my personal opinions about Christianity and Christians. So that is what he does. Okay, what does this have to do with Elden Ring lore? This little obscure idea that some Christians had to literally gouge their eyes out, mostly Catholics, which he is not being specific about. He's not being specific about. The people who do this have some very unique beliefs that most Christians don't even have. The people who do this there are many extreme people who do this. A lot of them are not Protestant. So why, to be honest, it's quite offensive. But he does not care about that. This was so important he had to go with this idea. Oh, yeah, Vike tore his eye out and this is his way of repentance. Yes, says who? Except him and his weird little ideas that he can basically, basically attack, basically portray Christians in this way with this shaky theory he has. Instead of talking about FromSoft's failure to present a clear and very good narrative in that, hey, if Vike is in two places at once, that does not make sense. Maybe we should put Vike in this place, and then move him to another place instead of making an Everjail Vike to fight who has his dragon spells. But you see, instead of doing that, no, they didn't. They have Vike in two places. He invades you, and plus he's in an Everjail. So how does that make any sense? But it does not matter because he does not want to talk about the inconsistencies in the narrative or even mention them. He does not want to say one single bad thing against Elden Ring because he believes this game is basically for people like him who basically, it seems, have some negative opinions about Christianity and Christians. So basically what he does here is very interesting. This was his way to springboard people into that conversation, into that sort of, he springboarded the video into basically talking about Christians. Christians gouging their eyes out. Oh, this is a popular form of penitence among Christians. He's not telling you what type of Christians do it. He's not telling you why. He's just giving you this broad cultural claim that he is making. That is what he is doing. And he knows it. Okay, he knew how shaky that theory of Vike was. And he did not go into the conversation of, hey, why is Vike in two places? He could say, hey, this narrative does not very much make much sense. Here are the problems with it. No, he's not going to take the time in his video to do that. And he did not. And so instead of talking about the inconsistencies of Vike literally being, how does that make any sense? How does it make any sense? You can find him in the Everjail. You technically do not even need to meet him at that church. You could just go directly to that Everjail and pretty much finish what you need to finish in the mainland, and then go to the mountaintops of giants. Find the Everjail, fight Vike, and go right back to the church, and basically Vike will invade you. Now, if it was consistent and FromSoft did their due diligence, and we would have no reason to criticize very much or very harshly, here's what would have happened. Okay, if we fight Vike in that Everjail, we should not be invaded by him. Or we should not even be able to go into the Everjail. So he is not going to explain that inconsistency. And I really do think it is an inconsistency. I'm going to do an experiment myself to see if FromSoft really, if that is not a narrative problem. But it is just as I say. It seems as though the FromSoft faithful cannot see any problems, any errors in the narrative or the game itself. People like myself, we are a different breed. Okay? People like myself started playing these games really early. Armored Core days, Kingsfield days, before these people thought it was cool. And basically say, they act like these games are manna from heaven. They are pretty obsessed with them, which is incredible. But anyhow, some people just want to take their little stabs, their little thrusts at Christians. They want to make those ideological thrusts. Okay, they really want to sort of change people's perspectives and influence the way people think about Christians. They really do. Which is interesting. Okay, I'm gonna play this again.
Back to Freud, who linked it to the Oedipal complex. More scientific researchers than Freud have pointed out that this horrifying act is far less common in non-Christian cultures, and many people who have removed their own eyes actually state they believe they either deserve this fate as punishment for sin, or can save some aspect of the world by removing their own eyes. One young woman who in 2017 had a psychotic episode.
And a person really has to think, okay, this is a video about lore. This is a video about a fictional video game. He is now talking about real Christians. And it is so obvious to those of us who are Christian that he has a problem with Christians because for whatever reason, okay, this whole subject he is talking about, okay, what does it have to do with the game? Other than the fact that you believe somehow that Vike sort of tore his own eye out, but you're not mentioning the fact that there are inconsistencies in this whole idea. Okay, there's inconsistencies. We have Vike invading us. We have Vike in an Everjail. We fought Vike. And as far as I know, if you invade, whatever his name is, that guy who, Vare or whatnot, and you kill him during an invasion, but I think he dies, but still, it is very inconsistent, and because technically you could fight Vike, as far as I know, and I'm guessing this, you can probably fight Vike in the Everjail before you ever fight him with the Frenzied Flame. So, I mean, if anything, I'm just trying to rationalize that. But he has some whole idea about Christians tearing out their eyes, and this is penitence. Okay, these are all just big guesses and speculations that he has, that to be honest are borderline offensive, if not overtly offensive, when you understand his history, and what he has said about Christians and what they think about Jesus, who we worship as our God, the Son of God, in whatever sense people think that is, whether we think he is the Word of God, whether we think that he is, this is a sort of Trinitarian idea. Christians, that is what we believe. But, for whatever reason, it was so important that he made the point that Christians made Jesus God. And that he was not some supernatural individual, but he was just a regular man that people, after he died, people took him and made him God. And everything that's said in the scriptures about him being resurrected, that's just a bunch of nonsense that those superstitious religious people came up with. It would seem. So when a person takes this in context and hears what he is saying about Christians now, wait, those of us who are Christians already know what he said about our belief in Jesus, so it makes a lot of sense that he would go through some sort of very convoluted sort of speculation about Vike, going on this weird quest for penitence where this guy, he's tearing out his eye. Not only is he tearing out his eye, he's also going to go to an Everjail and put himself in it. Is it worth it? Is it worth showing more of your anti-Christian bias just to do this? Because to be honest, for me, it's not convincing. And if I see it, hey, other people see it too. And, your fans may intimidate a lot of Christians who may want to say anything in that comment section or even get involved in it. But still, I mean, I see what you're doing, and I am certain that other people see what you're doing. Now, my video about you and what you say is just one video. I mean, these are all my opinions, to be honest. But, it builds up. I mean, maybe if I do this video, other people will express their opinions. And to me, that is the important thing, to be honest. Okay, because I think a lot of what, if he is listening, I'm just going to say it, a lot of what you say, Tarnished Archaeologist, personally, I think it's good to have a counterbalance to it. So, if I have to be that counterbalance, that is perfectly fine with me. If, and you folks who I mention in the FromSoft lore community who I happen to critique, I give my opinions about you, come along and you decide to leave the dislike and just, you're still giving me views. You're not really doing much. You're all too welcome to do that. It's very interesting. But, I mean, your history of bias is very clear. And you don't have to be a genius to see it either. So you can sort of do things in the way in which you talk about Christians constantly. It is an archetype used in the game that you show basically no respect for. You do not show respect for actual Christians when you're saying that the idea that we have, the belief that we have, the faith that we have in Jesus is misguided. You're not showing any respect. And you do not show any such disrespect to any other religion that this game gains any sort of influence from. This is a very religious game. It has all types of religious influences, but the people who you seem to continually mess with are Christians. And you know it. You clearly know it. Okay, quite something. I mean, wow. I mean, to know of people who will literally go to these lengths to say, hey, Christians are, they're tearing out their eyes. This is where this came from. Vike tore out his eyes. Yeah, Vike is in two places at once. Vike's narrative function doesn't even make sense. We're not going to criticize that. No, we're going to talk about Christians. We're going to talk about Christians even though the narrative, the way they treat Vike as a character does not make good sense. And it's the same is true for a lot of FromSoft jank, especially a lot of the stuff in Elden Ring. The story and narrative could have been far better. Okay, and a lot of things could have been far better explained. But a lot of you folks, you won't talk about that. And for Tarnished Archaeologists, no, it's more important to come up with some type of weird speculation about Vike and say, hey, Christians, this is a Christian thing, tear out your eyes. And this is what Vike did. And I'm thinking, okay, you went through all of that trouble to express your bigotry, to express your particular disdain for Christianity and Christians, and decide not to say, hey, it's just certain types of Christians that do this. A certain type of community of Christians that do this, in particular, it's not so much Christianity, it is psychosis. But when you want to connect Christianity to psychosis, which is a worldview, and you know that you could potentially have Christian viewers, you've already basically taken your time to undermine the Christians who view your channel before, and you are doing it again. You are clearly doing it again. And you are not going to get away with it in the sense that at least me, I'm going to point it out. I will. And I will continue to, because to me this is fun to do podcasts. This is a hobby of mine, and frankly, I hear some things in your videos like this and I just think, wow, because it kind of surprised me when I started to hear that anti-Christian stuff in that Golden Order video. I'm thinking, okay, you may have these opinions, but at the very least, just tell us that these are your opinions instead of trying to state them as though they're facts. Okay? And in this case, he's talking about so many Christians are tearing out their eyes. All right, where's the evidence and the proof of this? And if there is proof, the Christian church, which, in Scripture is called the body of Christ, which includes every single Christian in that collective, if he takes this into account and he is talking about proof, which he did not present any proof, he's just says certain psychologists said that Christians do this. Okay, give us some quotations. Tell us which Christians are doing this, which groups they're associated with. What type of penitence these people are engaging in, if they believe in the sort of Catholic idea of penitence or the Coptic or even Eastern Orthodox idea of penitence. Because a lot of us Christians who know our history, we already know that there are particular communities of Christians who engage in self-mutilation. And for him to say, oh, Christians do this, hey, which ones? Which denomination? Which cult or what have you? Which type of people are doing this? That is what we want to know. What he said was downright brazen and audacious. Okay? That's what it was. And so it did not go over my head. I'm sure it did not go over a lot of people's heads. A lot of people had to catch it. Okay, just like your other video that you did about Jesus and Radagon. But I'm going to review basically as many of your videos as I want, to be honest. That was pretty incredible. But let me listen to the rest.
While on methamphetamine, stated that she believed she had to sacrifice her eyes to save the world. So, gouging one's own eyes out for penance is nothing new, and in Vike's case may have actually clarified him such that he is no longer affected by the flame of frenzy at all. The lands between narrowly avoided disaster, only to wait for a new tarnish to come along and be confronted with the same dilemma, to sacrifice his maiden and burn down the Erd tree, or to save his maiden but condemn the world to frenzied chaos. What that tarnished ultimately chooses depends entirely on how they see the world. Next time, as we continue this story, we will unravel the real world.
Okay, that's basically over. But, that was incredible. Now, it was so expertly placed in the end of the video that if you did not have much common sense, you would say, okay, I can understand why he put that in the video. But no, that did not make any sense at all. Because I think, okay, what is the purpose of mentioning Christians? And you do not present any proof of what you are claiming. You are claiming that this is something common amongst Christians, but you're not really providing proof. You're just claiming that some obscure psychologists who may have their own anti-Christian bias have claimed that Christians tear their eyes out. Okay. So, and as far as Freud, he certainly had a lot of biases, especially against Christians. So, the only sources that we hear from are from a source that we know is certainly biased, Freud, and from potentially biased sources, biased psychologists who have something against Christians. He is not talking about who is gouging your eyes out, what groups they're associated with, what their ideas of penitence happen to be. If he is talking about penitence, well, not all Protestants believe in penitence. Most Protestants have no belief in this Catholic idea of penitence. So he is saying Christians broadly. He's making a broad generalization. He's not talking about which groups are doing it. He is not presenting any cases, evidence, or anything of the sort. Nothing of the sort. He is not doing that. And a lot of these people in the From Soft lore communities do that. And for myself, if I say something, I would, if I say something, I would like to back it up. These people in the FromSoft lore community, a lot of them, oh my goodness, they're so weird. And I'm not talking about everyone. I'm talking about the particular YouTubers that I know and have had contact with. Okay, those are the people I'm talking about. This guy, he really thinks he is doing something by basically sort of undermining Christians and he is trying to be sly about it. And I think that he thinks he'll be able to change the way some people think about God and Christianity by doing this. He has some very clear motivations, in my opinion. It is so very clear because if he were being honest, he would have to say, okay, I have this crazy theory about Vike. Okay, and here's my ideas. Some Christians happen to do a certain thing of a particular sort. Maybe they're Catholic or whatnot. But there's no respect. He would just say things audaciously without any respect for our religious group. He does not do that with Buddhists. He does not do that with Muslims. No one else except Christians. Which shows that he has a bias against Christians. And a lot of, me and fellow Christians have been talking about this. And a lot of Christians who see these videos, they don't do videos about that. And you see, he's not going to change because he feels no reason to change. But whether he changes or not and he continues to do this, that is fine. Because I will do my own videos. Someone's going to find them and know about this. And these videos, some people do benefit from them. And sure, my channel's small, but I'm going to mention him. I'm going to use the mention system in every single video I make about him. And that goes for any of these people. Because frankly, I have the right to critique. And if they think, hey, we'll just send our fans over there. No, I'm not afraid of them. This is criticism, to be honest. It's what I see in their content. There are not a lot of people who review lore content. There are a lot of people who do reaction videos and do, oh wow, this video by Vati Video, it made me cry. And I'm thinking, these people who cry because of lore videos, they have to be that's sad. I'm not even joking. That is sad. If anything is worth crying about, it's the person who cries because they've seen a lore video by Vati Video or any one of these people. Really. A lot of these people express their biases. And I remember that video about Ashen Hollow. This is a man who literally said he was basically pretending. And he said it. He said he was putting on an act of trying to like Elden Ring. And I thought, okay, you don't really even like the game. You just wanted to do videos so you could get some prestige and money and build your channel. And when you found out the game was something that you could not understand, you decided to move to other video games because you were having a hard time really deciphering Elden Ring, and other people had more success at it than you. And you realized you could not do the same thing you did with Dark Souls. And so that was the case with Ashen Hollow. And I did a video about that too. And what I said basically summarizes that whole video. You don't, you can watch it if you want, but that summarizes the whole video about Ashen Hollow. So the FromSoft lore community is really interesting. You have a lot of people who have some very strong opinions about Christianity, Christians, and this is their outlet. And it was the same with Berserk. You had a lot of people saying, oh, Berserk, yeah, the church is evil. Christianity and Christians are stupid and all of this talk. And they were embracing a lot of the dark culture of Berserk. And for them, it was something really, really amazing. Not everyone was like that, but there were some people, they were really trying to sort of besmirch the image of Christians. And, Kentaro Miura, or whatever his name was, yes, he really did make this sort of Christian archetype group the villain. And apparently they're supporting Griffith. They're this evil group in Berserk. And that is most certainly done intentionally. Now, whether we say they're Catholic or not, and many of us Protestants, we have serious problems with the Catholic Church. If we're not Catholic, we obviously are Protestant. But oftentimes the Catholic Church is used in such a way to besmirch the image of all Christians, the reputation of all Christians. And the truth is, not all of us are associated with that type of thing. But not to mention the fact that a lot of people, were born and were raised to be Catholic or Greek Orthodox, and they have their own institutions. There are a lot of institutions that are corrupt, but it is very interesting that the institutions that they choose to criticize the most, or rather the institution that they choose to criticize the most, in a lot of these RPGs and even anime and manga, they often make the church to be extremely evil and maligned and demonized. They really demonize it. They really do, to such a large extent that it is ridiculous. And this is fine with the atheists. This is fine with people like Aegon of Astura and all of these people who, it basically acts sort of like an echo chamber that is able to basically reinforce their own atheistic and anti-Christian prejudice. A lot of these people, they do not want to admit their anti-Christian prejudice. And they would never openly show it. But things like Berserk and things like games like Demon Souls, where you see a lot of the priests are down on the ground and dead. Okay, in other words, there were a lot of dead corpses, of dead corpses. That's an oxymoron, isn't it? That's funny. I guess they're not undead, they're dead. How crazy. Of course corpses are dead. Anyhow, there were a lot of corpses with the sort of priest model. And basically you had corpses in the chainmail, type armor that a lot of your faith starting class is. And basically a lot of them were just lying on the ground dead. Now, a lot of us know Miyazaki was inspired by Berserk. And basically Berserk presented the church and a lot of these sort of, this type of Christian archetype is basically being extremely evil and associated with Griffith. And Griffith was the villain, and he was sort of this type of almost anti-Christ-like figure, or sort of messianic figure, in that whole manga. And so, there was a lot of church-type imagery used in Berserk, and basically, it was never really portrayed in any good way, any good fashion. So that is the idea. You take something like Christianity, use it as an archetype, and basically never present it in any positive fashion. And when you do that, what you do is you're able to make the audience, so you're able to show this to the audience. Now, a lot of the people who play these games or read Berserk or watch Berserk, they already have a bad opinion about Christians. So this only reinforces their biases even more. So, a lot of people like myself, we see that. And a lot of you viewers, you probably do not want to hear this, but hey, sometimes as Christians talk and express our opinions. I know that is quite surprising to many individuals. Sometimes we express our opinions and we tell you exactly how we feel about things. That is not wanted by many. Because many people do not want us to talk or to have any type of opinion about anything. Because after all, we believe in one God. We don't really, we're exclusive, so to speak. We're peculiar people, and therefore, no one wants to hear what we have to say, or at least that's the idea that some people have. But, this is what I saw. This is what I see on a daily basis in a lot of media. And so do I have any particular problem with the media in that I think it should not be made? No, of course it. Media is media. But because this media and is open to interpretation, I have my own interpretations of it that are going to differ from other people, especially people who are not Christians. They have different perspectives of media than I do. And so I am sharing that with you in this podcast. Now, I had planned to talk about a lot of different things, but I think I'm going to talk about that in another podcast. This is more just me talking about the Elden Ring, the sort of FromSoft, even Dark Souls lore communities. Or rather, community, so to speak. Because to an extent, the people who did Dark Souls content are the same people who do Elden Ring content. There's a lot of new people who are very refreshing to see now in the Elden Ring. In the Elden Ring YouTube community. However, a lot of these people are the same people that a lot of us saw making Dark Souls videos who, were... I saw a lot of the biases even then. But for this person, Tarnished Archaeologist, he is probably... You see, he is the one that I've seen who is explicitly biased. Explicitly biased. I can say things I disagree with regarding Cassative or Aegon of Astora or Ashen Hollow or Vati Vidya. Redgrave does not do videos anymore. But I can even talk about things that I disagree with him about. But, at this point, I just say it, at this point, I can say that although I may disagree with all of those people, I cannot say that they have been explicitly biased, where it seems as though it is almost as though they intentionally want to make a point about Christians just being horrible people. This person is literally making a video where he had no real point to build off, and he had no real actual evidence to say that this person, Vike, was repenting of anything. Okay, how are you supposed to know that Vike is repenting and putting himself in an ever jail, and you're using this as a point that you can build off and say, hey, Christians, this is something Christians do. He knew what he was doing. He had to have this, and this is an edited video. If he wanted to, he's not speaking sort of in an improvisational way like I am. This is unedited. Now, this guy was speaking edited. Okay, this is edited content. He edited this content the way it was. Okay, he intentionally did this. This was not some type of mistake. He knew what he was doing. He knew exactly what Christians would think about it. At least those of us who know that he is basically saying, hey, this is what you should think about Christians. It's just like the video about Radagon. Oh yeah, Radagon was not a real God. This is what you should think about Jesus, that those Christians are making Jesus into God. So, this is serious stuff. I have never seen this from any FromSoft YouTuber yet. This is the only one I've seen this level of real bias against. This is serious bias. This is serious prejudice. And it's done in a way to make it seem as though, to make it seem hidden, basically. He did this in a way to make it seem like his biases were hidden. Like, almost as though we wouldn't notice it. But you do not have to be a genius to really figure out what he did. And for someone like me, it's appalling, but anyhow, that makes me think of a few different things, to be honest. But yeah, that theory was ridiculous. That theory was about Vike was so ridiculous. And that is the interesting thing about a lot of these FromSoft YouTubers, and it's not the case with all of them. Some of them make good content for years on end. I remember during the Dark Souls days, You had people who make good content for years on end. Okay, and they don't make missteps like this, where literally you're taking the video into a tangent, where you're literally talking about a whole group of people, and you're saying, yeah, this whole group of people, this is something they do. They tear their eyes out. Okay, if you're gonna make a claim like that, show us the evidence. He did not do that. He did not do that at all. But that was pretty incredible. That was pretty incredible, to be honest. And, regardless of how many views this video gets, it has been made. So, I have to say, from now on, I'm going to keep an eye on his channel and do some review content about it, to be honest, because, a person like this, it is incredible. Let me just say, it is really incredible. Why he has such a fascination with basically trying to undermine Christians, I do not know, but that is exactly, in my opinion, that is exactly what it is. Exactly what it is. But as for my plans for content, I do plan to have this sort of Elden Ring podcast as type of a series. I'm not particularly sure what I'm going to title this video, whether I'm going to title it Tarnished Archaeologist Compares, says that Christians are prone to psychosis. That may be a good title. Tarnished Archaeologist claims that Christians are prone to psychosis. Of course, it would be nice to have this in as few words as possible so that the title won't be too long, but Tarnished Archaeologist claims Christian... Yeah, that's going to be a few words. Probably too long a title. I usually title these videos Elden Ring Podcast now. That was my plan, at least. But anyhow, my goodness, that was just terrible. That was just terrible. That whole video was just it was just a mess. He's talking about river worms. He's saying that Shibiri, this supernatural Jewish demon, okay, he's going to explain that away. He's going to explain the supernatural, the Jewish demon is now a river worm, okay, and apparently that is what it is. Now, he's not citing any sources about Shibiri being a river worm, but even if he does, it really does not have anything to do with explaining the connection between Shibiri and basically, the Frenzied Flame, because the Frenzied Flame is supernatural, and Shibiri is a sort of a demon, and demons are supernatural. And obviously, to me, there's no river in Elden Ring to where that a person gets this from. Okay, but if anything, there are some connections a person could make to the Dark Souls 1 sort of Witch of Isola Flame of Chaos, okay? But, that's just what I think. But, people are going everywhere with their connections. At least Tarnished Archaeologists, but my goodness. It's kind of exhausting dealing with stuff like this, because the amount of anti-Christian bias that I encounter, it borders on ridiculousness at this point. It really does. These are people who, for the most part, it would seem, really do not want anything to do with Christianity or Christians, but they're always talking about it. And this is a game that heavily uses the Christian archetype. So, Christianity is used as an archetype. He has, but it was just like this in Dark Souls. In the Dark Souls period of the FromSoft lore community, in which, you know, anything related to Christianity, to the Christian archetype, that is obviously bad. Gwyn is deceiving everyone, and he's a bad character, and all of this talk. I mean, even watching that video of Cassidy was saying that, you know, Ronnie was doing a good thing by killing her brother. And I just think, to me that seems incredible. I could never rationalize that to be good. Her brother is dead. I mean, he's been given this horrible fate of basically not being able to die. And, you know, it was weird. I mean, oh my goodness. The talk about Ronnie is just crazy. The people who basically sort of advocate and support Ronnie, that is some of the craziest stuff I've ever seen. And they try to say that the Japanese ending was presenting something different, but I've read the Japanese ending. And to me, the Japanese ending is just as terrible as the English ending. I mean, she's taking the Golden Order away, which is, I mean, she's literally taking faith away. I mean, and if the Golden Order is life, okay, I mean, if you take it to the stars, we see what the fire giants do, okay, and we see what she did. She does not care about anything physical. I mean, the fire giants burn everything physical down. I mean, even the spirit ash from the Eternal City with the two women who are from the Eternal City, they became spirits. It seems as though anything having to do with that whole faction of ice, at least regarding the crone, that anything having to do with the mountaintops of giants, basically. I mean, everything physical has been destroyed. So what does that indicate to us? I mean, Ronnie does not even care about her body. And what type of order is that going to be? It's going to be an order in which I would think, you know, there's no real physicality. Is there regression? Is there causality in her order? Or does she freeze? Does she literally freeze existence itself? Who knows? But personally, I think that what happens is that existence in some way just changes. I mean, there's a reason she is very serious about what she is doing, and it is considered traitorous what she is doing. Honestly, I think that's quite a terrible ending. And I'm going to talk more about the implications of that ending in another video, but her own brother, Cassidy basically did a video about Ronnie and the Age of the Stars, and basically, I don't know how people can talk about these things and really justify them. How can a person justify that? That's a terrible fate. I don't know. Maybe I expect too much from some of these people, especially on YouTube. But my goodness. To be honest, it was the same thing in Dark Souls. It was the same thing in Demon Souls to an extent. People were making the same points they're making now about Elden Ring. And in Berserk especially, the Christian archetype is always evil. That's the idea behind all of this stuff. It really is. And I cannot speak to any of these people's personal history that they may have had as Christians or not, but it is interesting. And it was the case in Final Fantasy X as well, and a couple of Final Fantasy games, and a lot of media, especially from Japan, where the church is the villain. Now, there are many students of the craft, so to speak, because I have to watch my words, especially on YouTube. If you mention a particular organization of brothers, so to speak, a particular brotherhood, so to speak. But anyhow, I said it. That's more of a type of a lodge thing, to be against Catholicism and Christianity in the church. Not to say that there aren't, Christians in Baptist churches, especially Southern Baptists, who attend the Masonic lodges, but there's a whole interesting dynamic having to do with that. But to be honest, I don't know, the media now that I see on a daily basis, you rarely see anything positive about Christians or Christianity. You really have to search for it, or you have to basically read books, which is one of the reasons why I read so many books now. Some of these people, all of these people I have mentioned, could do with reading more books about symbolism, because this game mostly has to do with symbolism, and a lot of these people are blind to it. They're talking about all types of off-the-wall stuff, and I'm thinking, okay, what do you know about numerology? This game has a lot to do with numbers. I rarely see many people talk about numbers. Numerology in this game. Where are the astrologers who could be talking about some of the implications having to do with causality and fate and many other things? People have to read actual books to understand this stuff. And for now, this is sort of a ranting video I'm doing now, but I plan to basically do more research. Because, to be honest, for a person such as me, that is sort of the advantage of not being a fan. You can look at something objectively. But if you're a fan, you can't really look at anything objectively. It has no flaws. All of a sudden, Elden Ring is suddenly the perfect game. Okay, for these people. For me, all of these FromSoft games, they have glaring issues that a lot of the same people that I've mentioned will not talk about. So many of these Elden Ring and FromSoft YouTubers, they just won't. Okay, but the church always has to be bad. The church always has to be, without any doubt, the church always has to be bad. And many of us already know, this was an old Dungeons and Dragons sort of D&D concept. This whole concept of faith and intelligence and so forth. And you have your little Christian paladin archetype and, clerics and priests and so forth. But we know that the narrative archetype being used is Christianity. Abstractly, in a occult sense, it is white magic. Okay, which, no Christian basically... Christians basically, our teachings do not teach that this is white magic, or, but this is what is presented. And so, it is presented that, basically, you have a sort of Christian institution that somehow has power in the lands between, or in Boletaria. Not necessarily Boletaria. Demon Souls was a bit more nuanced than I could appreciate some of the nuances in Demon Souls. The storyline was a bit different, but in Dark Souls, definitely the church, Gwyn and all of those people were definitely considered to be villains, and at least by the gaming public, because to be honest, Dark Souls was rather unclear about a lot of that stuff in terms of narrative, and even Elden Ring. But we have these same God-hating, anti-Christian people who, they will express their opinions, and they will express them loudly, and they are sort of the vocal minority, so to speak, because you have a few YouTubers who sort of set the narrative for what this game means. To be honest, it really seems that way. And I really don't know what else to say. I mean, I myself, I plan to be doing a video series where I read Berserk and give my commentary about it. Because, to be honest, I think, regardless of what I say or what anyone like me says, I think a lot of this all started at Berserk. A lot of it all started at Berserk, and so I think for me, and especially on my channel, this is not going to really, I mean, this discussion is not going to be expanded to its fullest degree until I start because I have watched Berserk as the anime, but I've never read the manga. And so now I think, in order to really get into this mindset of anti-Christian prejudice and the sort of idea, the sort of prejudice that are presented, and a lot of this manga and anime, I'm going to start reading Berserk. I mean, to be honest, you have so many of these narratives, but that influence a lot of what Miyazaki does. But I think Berserk might be exactly where I should start looking, because I mean, I know he got influences from H.P. Lovecraft, and he has gained influence from different movies and all types of stuff. As personally, I think pulp fiction magazines have a lot to do with his type of horror, though I will say the narratives are not so very good, to be honest. I mean, they could have been implemented better if this game had, if all of those FromSoft games had more NPCs, more characters to talk to and the like. But that's a whole different subject, to be honest. But my goodness, I mean, seriously, I mean, to me, I just cannot. It's just stunning. I'm still trying to rationalize what I heard in that video about the Frenzied Flame, about Vike repenting, and then segueing that into saying, oh, Christians, yeah, they tear their eyes out. This is a Christian thing. Yeah, wow. Okay, and I mean, there's a video I want to review that Cassidy made where she sort of does some of the same type of criticism, but they do it in different ways. A lot of these YouTubers do it in different ways, and for whatever reason, they had a bad experience with Christianity, and it really shows in their videos. It really does. And so, I mean, they have every right to have their opinions, but that's not going to stop me from critiquing it and really trying to analyze what they say and sort of see if what they're saying is really as logical as they think it is. Okay? But anyhow, this has been very interesting. I thought I was going to talk more about the game and the lore and the narrative and the symbolism, but I decided I want to talk about some things having to do with the community, so to speak. So this ended up taking longer than I ever would have thought it would. Anyhow, viewers, may you be blessed and farewell. All right.